Hey everybody, this is Kevin Quigley. Welcome to Tarot Off the Cuff. So we're sort of jumping the gun on a bit of an unusual experiment, and this has always been in the plan for me, but I expected this to start happening in January. But here in the United States, it's November 4th. Yesterday, we had a big federal election and the votes are still being tallied. And there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of strife in the air and indecision, because usually the mathematicians, the statisticians know what our election, how it shakes out the same day, right? So this is a big deal, and there's a lot of division. Now, I don't necessarily want to do readings specifically about the election, because not all of our viewers are citizens of the United States, and not everybody's going to be watching this tomorrow, on Thursday. You may be 10 years later, right? So we're going to sort of abstract those ideas and draw a few cards on that. So maybe they'll be helpful for people right now, but hopefully they'll be helpful for people next year and the year after that and whatnot. So I'm joined by...
Hi there, everybody. I'm Janis Garan, buddy of Kevin's and psychic reader. And today for my deck, I'm going to be using the Gaian Tarot.
Awesome. Oh, and did I even say my deck?
What are you using today?
Introduce yourself and then say your deck. And then I forgot to even do that. So I've got the Light Seer's Tarot here. So I'll push a little bit, just because I'm the one that has had this idea in my head for a while, and I just sent a text message to Janis and say, hey, are you around? Do you want to do this? And she jumped. I love that kind of courage. As an artist and performer, I am an improviser, and it was many years ago that I realized, as tarot readers, we are also improvisers.
You betcha.
So, yeah, so those two things go hand in hand, I think. All right, so we've both got a shuffled deck of cards that we know pretty well, and I thought we would ask some questions, and we'll do them, maybe we'll pull cards individually and take a look at things from two perspectives, or at least often from two perspectives. One would be, if you happen to be a tarot reader or a counselor that uses some metaphysical form, how might the card apply to you? And then either we'll draw another card, or if that moment is juicy enough, we'll then say, just as a person dealing with this particular issue or a particular issue, how might that card apply there? So this will be a little bit more reading-ish than most of the videos that we do, which are just talking about technique or a specific card, right? So here's my first question. And Janis, if at some point you've got a question, you can throw it out and one of us will draw a card.
All right.
So maybe I'll ask the question and you can draw one of Joanna's cards, and then we'll both see if we have something to say. In the United States in particular, we have been dealing with a lot of division within our culture. We use a two-party system, so things are sort of heads or tails, and our votes in this weird little democracy, this representative democracy we have, are so often less than 1% apart, meaning literally half of us are on one side and half of us are on the other. So as a tarot reader, let's draw a card to get maybe a piece of advice or some idea on how we can handle if we've got a client that comes to us and they are dealing in their life with some sort of a divided circumstance. It could be a family squabble or something at work, or like in the United States right now, an entire culture that feels divided against itself. Let's see what we get.
Sounds like a plan. You go first.
Oh, you want to start a Light Seer's card first?
Yeah, and I'm going to pick it, yes, at mine as well.
So I'm just going to show it to the camera. I don't know what this is. Hopefully I can see it and read it. I can. We have the Knight of Pentacles. I love this card. Should we talk about it first, or do you want to throw a second card up?
How about I pick one off the top of my pile? I have not looked at it either. So, Major Arcana card, Awakening, number 20.
Great.
Lovely.
All right, so I'll put the cards up on the screen. I think I'll have time to do that. So that Knight of Pentacles for me is the big message there is slow down. one of the pieces or one of the ways, let's do a technique thing, that I use the court cards. As I was learning the tarot, I realized there are about 50 million different kinds of ways to read court cards. Every single tarot reader I talked to that had more experience than me had a completely different way, and they all seemed to feel that their way was the right way to read tarot cards, and none of them resonated with me. So the way I boiled down to working with the court cards, even as a beginner, but I still use this, is they always only represent the person I'm reading for.
Mm.
One of the kind of costumes that they might wear. So, in a reading for myself or for someone else, the Page of Pentacles shows up. That message is not somebody in your life is coming in to slow things down or to be more careful. No, it's you. Change your pace, slow your roll, right? Um, so I'm taking a look at social media, I'm having conversations with people, and I am seeing how fast, in regards to the division in our culture specifically, but I think this happens all the time in regards to divisiveness, people race miles down the road into what it means. And oh, this person made this decision and then they did this and then they did this and then they've decided, and they box people up and the situation up into certain really specific small rooms that aren't necessarily true, right? And I've got a couple of really wise friends that their messages on social media and in personal conversation is all about like, no, you got to slow down and take people as who they are right then, right there when you're talking to them. And the person that you have might want to brand as a monster, they're not. They just aren't. So making that particular call and taking your time with that particular relationship or that conversation, I think can really get you away from the division pretty quickly.
I love, first of all, I have to jump in and say, I love hearing how you read the court cards because you're right. So many people see them in so many different ways. I kind of bounce all over the place in how I read them. It almost depends on the reading, right? Whether it's somebody else in your life or you, an aspect of you, someone you know, etc. So we need to do a class on the court cards, all
Yeah.
of us.
That's actually when I teach the tarot, my favorite way to start is looking at the court cards.
Oh, really?
If I'm teaching beginners. So if I've got a class full of beginners, the two things. One is I've got such a tiny, simple way of using them. It's always the person you're reading for, period, right? So that makes it less complex. And then there's only 16 of the cards. So we pull out 16 cards, and for total beginners, now it's not so overwhelming, right? And you can do a whole reading with just court cards,
For
right?
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, in a perfect kind of segue, you can do an entire reading with a major arcana card as
Totally.
well. Probably write an entire book on one of these. Awakening, card number 20, major arcana, usually in other decks called judgment, which you were talking about judging people, right? And that's one thing I've noticed. And again, not even to get political, but everybody judging everybody else, and I'm right and you're wrong, when I think that this card, it's especially the beautiful artwork on it, clearly shows that we're all connected, and it's almost like, can't we all get along, and let's take the long view on things. I mean, I don't know if these, and Joanna, I apologize in advance, storks, cranes, those birds flying at the top. I don't know if you know specifically what kind of birds they
I
are.
don't. Yeah. But I
Uh,
love the deck. Yeah.
they're beautiful. Well, and in the background at the very top of the card, you see a Buddha, like a Buddha face in the background in the clouds. And I feel we need to yes, slow our roll, but we also, when there's division, we need to take a moment and think of the bigger picture. you
Mm.
know, not just our own little perspective. I know I actually have friends in particular about the election who like will not speak to anybody who doesn't believe what they believe. And I think, wow, how kind of narrow-minded. I would be curious because I have friends on both sides without even saying what side I'm on, because it doesn't matter. I'd be curious, oh, hey, friend who thinks differently than I do, who I respect, um, why do you feel the way you feel? So it would help me. I don't feel challenged by somebody having a different opinion. The only time I feel challenged is when I have to defend my own position, and I'm not very good at defending stuff, I guess. Not very good in the moment with a good debate for a good debate, um, with, facts to back up my side of things.
Yeah.
But that could be because I kind of feel things just intuitively, and sometimes it's hard to explain. But, to hear other people's opinions without judgment, to allow everybody to be who they are, um, I feel like that's one way of dealing with division, is not by jumping to the side that you agree with and defending it at all costs, but by being open, kind of being gentle, by taking that higher perspective and just trying to look at things from outside your own, how this affects me personally. Does that
Totally
make
on
sense?
board. Oh yeah. It also reminds me of I started digging through the Abraham Hicks stuff a few years ago,
Yeah.
and they use the term contrast to describe this vital quality of the capacity for growth. Is if you reduce the amount of contrast in your experience, meaning remove people and ideas that disagree with a viewpoint that you've already accepted, you actually reduce or remove even the chance that you might grow and become a bigger person or a truer version of who you are, because it's these maybe oppositional but at least different ideas that allow us to become something bigger, right? So that idea of judgment, of rising above, is right on that. Yeah, and I love the renaming of awakening
So
in
do
this
I.
deck. Yeah.
Love this deck.
All right, do you have an idea or a question? I've been thinking about this all day and I just sprung it on
Oh,
you, so I've got
then,
dozens.
then hit me with a question, because I've had a long day at work. So
All right.
yeah.
This one actually came up in, maybe it's a segue from the Knight of Pentacles that I drew, is this idea of needing patience.
Mm,
And I'm witnessing people on both sides of this particular aisle really struggling with that right now. So we don't have a result. We don't have a tally that we can reliably say is, here it is. Here's the result of this particular vote. So oftentimes I have read for, I've sat down as a reader and I've read for clients with people that have rushed to a conclusion of some kind. And I realized that it's not actually my job to let them know what the actual conclusion might be, but rather to just slow them down so they can. Um, Now I'm jumping to Pema Chodron. So one of her things is sit in the uncomfortable place where you don't know and just be there. One of the best things you can do for yourself in that situation is to notice how you respond to not knowing yet. How does your body twitch? What kinds of thoughts go through your head? Do you start arguments with people, or do you go get a giant piece of cake, right? Like, pay attention to how your body deals with that, and just occupy your mind with observation, and then eventually the world's going to figure itself out. Because like, for instance, in this case, it's not you that gets to make the choice. This is a huge collective mathematical, spiritual, emotional, political, social undertaking that just happened. Um,
true.
so how does one deal with the need for patience in that twitchy space?
All right. Let me pull a card.
Ooh.
Four of Earth. This is a beautiful card, because this actually is what it looks like outside right now. I mean, right now it's night, but it's the fall here where I am. Um, gosh,
Do you read reversals?
yes, I do. But I wasn't planning on it in this particular
Okay.
case.
Mhm.
You know what? Half of my mind is joking with me and saying, patience drives me nuts because there's all these nuts at the bottom. I am not a good person with patience, I don't think. I mean, I can be if infinitely patient kind of maybe with other people. But like yeah, I we are so used nowadays to having fast food, fast information on the internet, just everything is fast, 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 that when we have to wait, it's extremely frustrating. Um, when I look at this card, I think of cycles, honestly, and this is not a card of cycles, but that's what's coming to me at the moment. And I think one way for me to like develop patience in a time of uncertainty, because I do not like uncertainty, although most of the time life is uncertain, uh, is to remember that things do go in cycles and that we've been in uncertainty before, we'll be in uncertainty again. Things actually end up working their way out, and that it's just a natural part of that cycle. For the Wheel of Fortune is popping into my head for some reason now, but that's not the card I pulled. So, how are you seeing this?
Well, I would say actually that the Wheel of Fortune in Joanna's deck has the 4 trees on it in the seasons, right? So
Yeah.
you're it feels to me you're jumping off of that idea. That's how what does the fall mean, right? Um,
Mm,
and as a teacher, I've got a very rambunctious 5th grade right now.
mhm.
I teach arts, and currently I'm teaching from 3rd grade to 8th grade. Usually I focus on the middle schools, but with how strange the COVID situation has happened, I've had to expand the number of grades that I teach. And the 5th grade in particular really struggles with patience. And one of the things that I learned from another master teacher many years ago that I tie to this card specifically, this 4 of Earth, is he said if you have a particular anxious child or a particular child that is struggling, what are we doing next? What are we going to what whatever, all of those things, is to give previews. This is one of the most powerful bits in my teachers lexicon or my little tool belt, but I also use this as a reader. If I've got a nervous client, I'll say, here's how this is going to go. And I'll walk them through my reading process before we're doing the reading. And then if they're still nervous, I give little signposts as we go. But you could walk by a certain child's desk, and while the other kids might be getting their coats on or like getting prepared or even having conversations with each other, you can say, just so you know, little Johnny, or whoever it is, the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to make sure that we all go into the coat room and we get our coats on because we're going to run outside to play. I just want to make sure you know that that's what's going on. And then you'll notice that the anxious child goes, oh, right. So they've got a little bit of an idea of what the next signpost for them is, right? And it lets them get by so that they can make it there without flipping out.
Without going nuts, right?
Yeah, which is what's
No,
happening.
it is. Yeah, and you know what? I was one of those little anxious kids, so
Uh,
maybe I just grew up into a big anxious adult and have trouble with patience. Right. No, but you're right, and thank you for like reading my mind, because I think the world card, you're absolutely right. It does have all 4 seasons, and it's like this too shall pass. I'm also getting like prepare as best you can for
yeah,
all the different phases with that squirrel, gathering nuts for the winter, and then know that however well prepared or not or ill prepared as you are, it's going to come and go anyway, and more than likely you're going to survive.
yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the 4 of Pentacles from the Gaian. So
Yes.
I just had something amazing happen. I pulled the top card off of the Light Seer's Tarot.
Oh, same thing.
Same card, right? Yeah, except now we're in
Oh,
the Suit of Pentacles instead of, the elemental Earth. Um,
right.
how interesting is that, right? And we can see in the image that the woman's got a pocketbook of some kind. It's clasped closed, and she's making sure that she's ready for what might come next, right? So How fascinating is that? Boy, I love it when that kind of thing happens.
That's crazy.
Yeah, amazing. Okay,
Welcome to hashtag tarot life, right?
yeah,
We need
totally. We call, you may or may not know if you're an experienced reader, we call these, or many people call these, Janice, I don't know if you've heard this term, but I love it. We call them stalker cards. And stalker cards are the cards that show up for you constantly. So, and I get stalked by cards almost every like fair that I do. So I'll sit down in the morning and I know, okay, I've got 12 to 20 readings I'm going to do today. And in 9 of those readings, I'm going to see one card over and over and over and over. And I really do take those as significant for me outside of the context of the readings I'm doing. Like, okay, if the Chariot has just shown up for me 11 times out of 20 readings, what does that mean, right? So I'll sit and meditate with just that card.
That's interesting. I have not heard them called stalker cards, but I have noticed at events, the same card will come up over and over for the same group of people. But I've never thought of it as a reading for myself. So thank you very much. Add that to my repertoire.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question. Do you have anything burning in your brain that you want to close us with?
No.
All right, what do we close ourselves with? Ooh, okay, I've got one. This is not one that I thought up earlier today. How about, I think it was Monet. Sorry, I'm going in an oblique way at this question. I want to say it was Monet. Somebody told me this story, but it could have been someone else that had a painting hung in a big museum, the Louvre or, a big deal museum while he was still alive. And one evening, a few months after the painting was put up on the wall, somebody was watching something strange happen in that particular gallery, and they called security. They went and found security, and security guards came rushing to the painting because they found someone standing in the gallery with a miniature palette that he brought in his coat and a brush, and he was painting on a Monet. It was Monet.
Oh my gosh.
I think it was Monet. In my brain, I have it memorized that way. If it's not, put a comment down below if you happen to know, because I really want to get this right and let people know that it's right.
We need to know.
Yeah. But he couldn't decide that his piece was finished. Like it was itching at him. And as a songwriter and a poet myself, I often let the piece tell me when it's done. And even if I don't necessarily intellectually feel it's done, if the piece decides for itself, but I don't always know, right? So this idea of eventually, could be later tonight, could be tomorrow, it could be later in this week, we're going to actually get some kind of decision made. How do we arrive at an ability to accept the decision, even if we might disagree with it? Even if we might be dissatisfied with the way at which we arrived at the decision, right? How do we move on with our lives? Or does that become like this weird anchor that sort of hangs out in our past and follows us so that now we can't keep going, right? We stop living our life at that moment because we're stuck there. This happens all the time in people's biographies with traumatic experiences. So if I take it away from the current American political reality, anytime we have a traumatic experience, how do we actually sort of close it up and accept it and continue to grow and continue to live in a forward way as opposed to spin our wheels wherever that and whenever that happened?
Just divided my deck into 2 piles. Oh, the Canoe, the Chariot, right? In the traditional deck. Number 7, Major Arcana.
Which is the card I just mentioned.
Yes, it is.
Discussion, yeah.
Oh, it's stalking you.
Yeah, totally.
In a different format. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah, hashtag tarot life. Okay, the Canoe. It's you know what this tells me, and maybe I shouldn't be holding up my card over and over again because I know you're going to paste it up somewhere. But in this deck, it looks like he's absolutely moving on under his own power. So this card would make me think that the answer, I mean, doing a reading on this card tells us that you're responsible for moving on yourself. Like you can't expect other people to help you. I don't see any other people here. I mean, I see animals, I see dolphins, I see birds and fish. Uh, in nature, though, I mean, when I look at this, I think it's every mammal for themselves, or it's every
Mhm.
person for themselves.
I
How
like
do
that
we
a
move
lot.
on? We have to find our own way of moving forward, and maybe that looks different. I like to think this is go with the flow, in a gentle way, like, let's find some way that feels like flow to us. You're right, people get stuck all the time. Um, in the past, that's one of the biggest people don't come to me for that reason. I'm so stuck in the past, but some of the questions they ask, or I'm having trouble moving forward. And sure enough, like you said, there's some little anchor from the past. And I can think in my head, like, oh, clearly all you have to do is X, Y, and Z. And I can offer those insights, but you can tell whether, people are not dumb. They've probably thought of these things. They've probably tried to move forward on their own. And you can tell when you give advice, if it is like, oh, wow, I've never thought of that before. I think I'll try it. Or if you get this, yeah, been there, done that kind of feeling. And if there is that been there, done that kind of feeling, uh, I think it's almost up to the reader to, be a guide or a companion or hanging out with the person as they figure out their own way forward, maybe by asking some helpful questions. Well, what have you thought of? What hasn't worked for you? Do you think this might work for you? Or what do you think would work for you? Or when you've come up against different things in the past that have been similar, how have you moved forward? Because ultimately is them that has to move forward.
Right. I read with this deck a lot, and there's another thing that I've never thought about with this card before that I'm noticing now when you're holding it up is all of the animals on this card are predators.
Hmm.
So there's an aspect of like you need to go out and like attack. You need to, just like what you said, take charge. It's up to you to, and there's sort of an aggressive mode to that. Yeah.
For sure. I mean,
Killer
the
whales,
guy,
orcas scare the heck out of me. I don't know why.
what does?
The orca.
Oh,
You see like videos of people out doing whale watching and whatnot, and these orcas come up right next to their little rowboat. I'm like, that would end my ability to be out on that lake forever. Like,
to me, they look cute enough, and I think of Shamu at SeaWorld from when I was
totally.
little. I'm like,
Like,
oh, Shamu, before it bites my face off. Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah.
Maybe in a past life, yeah, I was prey. I don't know. All right, I'll draw a card and then we'll close.
Weren't we all prey at some point?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and some of us more than others. All right, I have, and we're talking about accepting conclusions and moving on. I pull the Knight of Cups from the Light Seers.
That just that was one of the examples of the cards, because I'm not familiar with the deck, that you showed me before we started. So now
Oh,
that's
interesting.
stuck in me. Mhm.
Wow. And I told, so then maybe you should start with an interpretation because I really shuffled the deck before we started. I'll keep it up so you can see it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at him. You know what? He looks so do we know who this is? Like, is it a famous person or is it just a guy?
I have no idea. I don't think she used any famous
All right.
models.
I mean, the Knight of Cups, to me, the Knight of Cups is the Prince Charming card. That's kind of how I think about it. But here he is with these roses. I mean, he looks casual. He looks like he's waiting with a picnic for somebody. How do we move on? To me, that's almost like expectantly waiting for what you know is going to arrive that's going to be good. It looks like he's waiting for somebody to show up and join the picnic with him, and he's prepared as such. Kind of hope for the best.
Yeah, there's an element of preparation which is similar to that 4 of Pentacles that you drew initially.
Yeah,
And again, I've been so into social media just because of what's happening in the United States today, over the course of the day.
not
That
me.
yeah,
Mm-mm.
it's crazy making. But although I will say that the point of it for me is not to get information, it's to actually wind up helping calm people down, right? So the one post that I put up this morning before I started teaching was, don't despair,
Aw.
right? Like, don't actively get into the point where you're cycling on despair and disappointment and whatever that is, right? um but this brings me to a meme of this. It's a beautiful meme. One of the reasons I love teaching middle school is because I think our culture needs to do better by our boys, to give them more options in terms of their character and their personality and who they can choose to be, redefining what it is to be a man, or even male, right? Um, I love that. And by the time we get into high school, I have taught high school. I find that so many of those patterns are set that it's much more difficult for me and my personality to help them adjust. And over the years, we're doing better and better. But middle school is the place where I find I work with that really well. But there's this beautiful meme of a mother. I'm sure it's just a parable, probably didn't ever happen, right? Those annoy me, but I love this one. Um, a mother talking to a son whose mom has found out that the son has asked a particular girl to a dance, and she recognizes that that is a requires some courage, right? So she knows that her son extended herself that way, but the girl said she was not interested in going with him. Yeah. And the mom says, you know what that means, right? And the boy responds with what he's being told by his culture and his friends, and over. The boy responds, yeah, I know, keep trying. And mom says, no. And he's shocked, right? And mom's response is, she made it clear that she's not interested in going to the dance with you. What that means is you leave her alone. You respect her decision that way. Now, you can go keep trying with other girls. I hope that's what you do, right? But in this case, you got to take it for what it is, right? So that Knight of Cups for me is that active part of ourself that steps out into the world, that allows ourselves to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
and you accept the no, right? You accept, oh, the election didn't go the way I was hoping it would. You accept the potential date saying she wasn't interested. You accept not getting the job, right? Whatever it is, whatever disappointment has happened, but you don't close your heart. You're in charge of your heart, right? And if you allow yourself to collect wounds that way, eventually you're not going to be able to approach anyone or be approached by anyone, right? And a lovely thing about this card, I'll hold it up again as well, is I feel like it reads to me like there's maybe a little disappointment, right? The shoulders are a little slumped. Um, Maybe there's some pain or some expectation floating around in there, but yeah, like he stepped off the horse, really, but he's still pretty open. Like he's still offering those flowers. His chest and his heart space is still wide open. He's removed his hat. Teaching middle school, one of the things I'm doing it right now. Actually, today was one of these classes, was getting my 6th and 7th graders for a knighthood ceremony. And they really spend their time working on 7 virtues of knighthood. They design their own coats of arms at my school. We carve swords out of hardwood. Lots and lots of things that they're doing, right? And they're getting to know this, and they often complain, especially in middle school, that moment when you'd sort of want to hide. They love having a hood up, or they pull the hat down really low, and we're like, no, you're inside. You take that stuff off. Your hat comes off. It's the first thing you do when you walk in a door of a building and you're now under a roof. And it wasn't until I started doing the knighthood work that I realized what that is a gesture of vulnerability. It's removing the helmet. It's removing a piece of armor that protects your most vulnerable piece, and it reveals your face to everyone. So they know how you feel, they know who you are. They'll remember how you made them feel. They'll remember the choices of action you made and all of that sort of stuff, right? So I love that little moment. And I love in this card that he's taken his hat off, right? He's still offering the flowers. So there is this knight has been in some battles, and looks like to me like maybe he's lost some, but he's still there. He's still there. So I think that's great. And I love that as maybe a last little button for that is, let's say the decision in the United States doesn't go the way you want it to. And you'll hear this all the time. Do people in other countries say this? Like, I'm moving to wherever, right?
Oh my gosh, I've heard that so much lately.
Yeah, and the Bernie Sanders, the senator from my state, one of the things he often says, I've heard him in person respond to someone in a crowd saying this. My state's small enough that we get to actually meet our politicians. He says, we need you here. It's important that you stay here. If you leave, that's a soldier that has left the army. That's not honorable. Like, he's that direct with that. He's like, can't do it. You stay. Even if the decision doesn't go your way, even if you're incredibly dissatisfied or disheartened with how it worked out, you stay and you keep doing it. And this guy is almost 80 years old, and his platform and his decisions, I turn this into a weird political ad, but I value this. Like, he's been at this since he was in his early 20s.
Wow.
He's never given up, right? How inspiring is that, right? So he's a knight of hearts for me.
Very Knight of Cups there, yeah.
Yeah, and he doesn't belong to either of the parties. Like, he hasn't joined that fight either, which amazes me, right? And he's still here. Yeah. So okay. Any last thoughts? Yeah.
Yes, I want to take your knight class there. I mean, can my inner child attend? Not that I want to go back to middle school, but did you say the 7 virtues?
Yeah, so each teacher comes up, the actual codes of knightly conduct has dozens of virtues, and each teacher comes up with 7. And they're important. They're things like honesty, diligence, love, compassion, and they all commit to them. And I even ask, so here's your 7, we'll talk through them, we'll define them to make sure everybody knows what they are in a conversation. And then these are the questions that make them a little uncomfortable. The first one is how many people recognize that of these 7 there are 1 or 2 that, man, they really get, they just come easy for you? Every hand goes up, and then they're all different. I never ask which ones are for you. And then I ask, how many people notice that there's at least one that's really hard for you? And all hands go up. And I just say, look around. This is challenging stuff. Like, we're not asking you to do small things right now. We're asking you to do big stuff, right? So, and that's where we are, I think, as a culture, as a global community, right? It's time for big stuff.
Absolutely. I hope to see you do a class on that with tarot.
Oh, I love that idea. Like a knighthood class.
Yeah.
Use the knights.
Which is your love card? Which is your, honor?
So maybe, I can make that happen. I love that idea. All right. So let's close this up. Yeah. I'm Kevin Quigley. I was reading with the Light Seers Tarot, and this is my friend
Janis Garan, and I was reading with the Gaian Tarot.
And welcome to Tarot Off the Cuff. If you like this format and the style, so these kinds of videos will go a little bit longer than our other ones, and they're different, put a comment down below and let us know, because we want to make this thing functional, informational, and fun for you. Cool.
Absolutely. Bye for now.
Hey, this is Kevin.
Hi, this is Nooch.
Thanks for watching.
If you like what you saw, please hit a thumbs up and subscribe. You'll know when new ones are coming. And share with your friends.
We'll see you soon.